I'm Melisa Nielsen of Waldorf Essentials, and today we're going to talk about how you sort of live in this world and be part of the world, but not of the world, and sort of how you work with that mix of there's all this other great stuff. And so I want to talk to wives and to husbands and to parents and grandparents right now, because I think that there is this misconception that especially, and I think it's really hard online, because you get online and you see, especially if you go to Pinterest and you type in a Waldorf, or you're just trying to look at Waldorf blogs, you are seeing the Waldorf aesthetic, which is very beautiful. It's very beautiful. The toys are beautiful. The silks are beautiful. The homes are beautiful for people that really work to live a Waldorf-centered life. And so that can be super intimidating. And so I want to talk a little bit about, if you're not coming from that place and you're coming to Waldorf later in your children's lives, or you and your husband aren't on the same page and you're really struggling about it, I really want to sort of talk about that space. Like, wait a minute, my husband would love it if I would let our kids go to something like that. Let's just break it all down. First, let's remember, again, that the Waldorf aesthetic and Waldorf education are two totally different things. They can live beautifully together, and when they do live beautifully together, excuse me, that can feel like you're in this nice, lovely, cloudy bubble. Let's break it and come back to reality. It is a great place to be, and we have a lot of that aesthetic in our house. And I've been at this for a long time, so when people say, oh, it's so expensive, it is. It can be. It doesn't have to be. You can make a lot of your own toys. We've done that for years and years, and dye your own silks and all of those things. And so it doesn't have to be super expensive. But I've also been at this for a long time. So when I purge, I'm purging Waldorf stuff because I got so much of it. And so and because we live this life, it's just like if you were mainstream person, you are doing your toy purge and you are purging little Star Wars action figures. It's the same. You still have to purge with Waldorf. You have to sort of go through that same thing. You have to make sure that it's not too much, because too much of anything is just too much. And so just don't think that just because it's Waldorf that means that it's great and you should have a ton of it, because we really have to work at balance all the time. And I think that's sort of the challenge when you come to Waldorf is you see, and I think this happens especially to moms, they come and they get a little turned on by the education part of it, and maybe they set that aside and they go, but these toys are so pretty. And they're really pretty. And I guess what I would encourage you to do, if you've been in that place and now you're looking at what you think Waldorf is all about and how it doesn't fit with your lifestyle, I want you to sort of step back. In fact, if you're listening to this today, I want you to make a commitment, especially if you're feeling really bad about things and you're frustrated. I want you to make a commitment to me right now, to sort of in your head, that you're going to stay off Pinterest and off pretty blogs and in that today. I think you have to step back and you have to give yourself a breathing room. And I think you have to remember too that people that take pictures on Pinterest and people that have beautiful blogs also have lives, and you're only seeing what is in front of the camera. You're not seeing the pile of dishes behind them. You're not seeing the disorganized room that they shove everything in. You're not seeing that. You're not seeing that their kids might really be struggling. You're not seeing that that mom might really be struggling, and then you're not seeing that. And so I want you to remember that is a reality. It is definitely a reality. There are I work with a lot of moms that are big Waldorf bloggers, and ladies, they struggle just like you do. And so I want you to keep that in mind. When you see something beautiful, that doesn't mean anybody that has this beautiful aesthetic and is doing really well at it should be ashamed or feel weird or feel bad about it, because absolutely not. I look at our own things and I sort of look around at what we've created and I go, I worked really hard for this, but it took me a long time. So I've been at this a long time. So my oldest is almost 20 and my youngest is 5. So my 5-year-old and my 10-year-old had the blessing of of everything that I went through with my older 3 kids. So, so don't get down on yourself about where you are in this journey. If you're looking around and you're still seeing piles of plastic toys and you just don't know how you're going to make it work, because you will make it work. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about sort of how you marry the two together. First, I want to talk about not alienating your husband. You know, I think it's really easy to come to Waldorf and you get super excited because you learn all this information, and this guy Steiner had all this great stuff that he was writing, and gosh, all this stuff on child development seems extremely like common sense. Like, gosh, I've always thought about that, or I always thought that was the way we should be doing things, and I just sort of pushed it aside, or maybe it's brand new to you and you're like, wow, I've never looked at my child like this before. This is amazing. And it is amazing. You know, when you understand Steiner's concept of development, and it goes from up here in your head to in your heart to you being able to see it and observe it everywhere, because once you understand it, you see it everywhere. And it jumps out at you because you have this knowledge then that you can see what's going on. You're starting to understand temperament. You're starting to really see those things. And maybe you go into Barnes & Noble and you see a great book that somebody might be picking up for their 9-year-old, but you're like, no, I'm going to save that for when they're in 7th grade. Excuse me. Because you're starting to understand the curriculum, and you're starting to understand that Waldorf is about bringing the right material at the right time. And so how do you take that knowledge and bring it to your partner without them getting defensive and without them being frustrated at you? And I think that the biggest thing that you can do is one, don't make what they do, don't demonize what they do. So, you know, I'm married for the 2nd time. We just celebrated 11 years. I was married with my first husband for 13 years. And we didn't really go through any of the what was appropriate stuff while we were married. He chose to wait until we got divorced. And he did everything that was inappropriate afterwards. But Eric and I have been married 11 years. I married Eric knowing that he was a Star Wars fanatic, and that he was a gamer, and that he was into comics. I married him knowing that. So I went into our marriage with a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old, knowing all of this. And knowing that, and he and I had talks about how we would have to balance it. And so he knew what my desires were. My desires were not to have my kids on video games all day. My desires were to not be bringing them things before they were ready. And he was really, because he was, at the time, he was in school to get a third degree in education. And so he was really interested in Steiner. And so he started to do some reading while we were dating before we got married. And so he started to really see the value in it. But that was not because I pushed it. It was because we were sort of in a common place. And so if you're not in a common place, the best thing that you could do is really say, honey, I am learning this stuff about development, and I would really love it if you would read it with me. And if you can't read it with me, can I send you some audios to listen to on the way to work? Or can I read it to you at night? Maybe while you're playing that Batman game, can I read it to you? Could we just talk about this? Could we come to an understanding? And I know you love this stuff, and I love that you connect with our kids with it. That makes me really happy that you connect together that way. But I really have this need for us to back off on some things. And so don't demonize everything. You just want to sort of talk about less instead of none. And so I would look at, because I think it's really easy to come to this and you go, Star Wars is bad, Legos are bad, Marvel is bad, you know, and just get like really, because you're seeing this beautiful aesthetic, and then you see these plastic toys, or you see this violence, and you see, so I want you to back up and take a deep breath, because there is violence in stories all throughout history. Some of the ones you're going to cover with Waldorf are going to have violence in them, and maybe they're going to be a lot different than the violence you're going to see on the movie screen, but I want you to just take a deep breath and realize this is something that I'm working with, and how do I work with it so that I have peace in my home? And the number one thing, especially if your husband has a 9-to-5 job, number one thing you can do is turn off the TV and turn off the games during the day. That will absolutely help you to turn those things off during the day. and to not have, because you are in charge when you're at home during the day. So you can say, okay, well, I'll let the TV come on, but it's not going to come on my watch. It'll come on later. And so when I was a single mom, I had to keep those rules, because, and even after I was married to Eric, because my kids would go to my ex-husband's house and get an insane amount of media. So they had none at my house for a long time. And when they had some, it was very controlled and very small, because I knew they were already going to be going and sort of having a media orgy at my ex-husband's house. So that was my way of balancing it. But when my kids went to bed, when my kids weren't there, Eric and I had fun with those things. So I think it's important to sort of understand a couple of things. So let's talk about Star Wars really fast. So Star Wars, if you understand Star Wars isn't just a series of movies. It's definitely much deeper than that. So George Lucas did a lot of work with Joseph Campbell. And when he was working on storylines, and Joseph Campbell is Power of Myth guy. He's passed away, but he's written a ton of things on myth. So mythology wraps itself into Waldorf. So if you can watch Star Wars from that mindset by yourself, and really see the archetypes that you're also looking at in fairy tales and in all the stories that are going through the Waldorf curriculum, you will see Star Wars in a different way. That doesn't mean you should let your 5-year-old watch right away, but it does mean that you should find ways to really understand what's going on there on the screen. So George Lucas is also a Waldorf dad. His kids went to Waldorf schools. His ex-wife was a partner in a Waldorf publishing company, and he did a lot of work for the Waldorf school in his area. So you should understand that that the daddy of Star Wars was a Waldorf daddy. And understanding that will help you connect to your husband. So I want you to utilize those pieces as bridges. Also knowing that doesn't mean that you should go whole hog. So one of the things and this was when I was married to my ex-husband, we were really just, our oldest was getting to the age where my ex-husband was like, maybe we should watch Star Wars. And I think he was probably 4, 5, maybe, yeah, about 5. And I remember like talking it over with a Waldorf teacher, in fact, a great Waldorf teacher, Barbara Dewey. And I remember asking her what she thought. And she said, she had the greatest wisdom, and I love it, and I use it all the time. You have the rest of his childhood to watch Star Wars. Why didn't you wait until he's old enough to understand it? And I remember when I said that to my ex-husband, he was like, yeah, you're right. Let's just keep it to, Little Bear right now, and gradually add some things in. So I do think that the original trilogy, Star Wars movies, the ones that are the old ones, like A New Hope, A New Hope is probably okay for 6, 7, and then maybe one per year after that. And the newer ones, the ones that were from about 10 years ago, those are more violent for sure. In fact, the very last one, I would wait definitely till over 9. But I would really be very careful with some of those and watch them all first. If you have a super sensitive child, then think about that. Also remember, we do have this trend that I see a lot, and it's not a Waldorf trend. And this is gonna like sting some people, and they're gonna be like, no, she's wrong. Stories that stretch our kids, even if they're uncomfortable, help build resilience. And we want them to build resilience in our house, under our roof, with us there with them, not someplace else. So when you're going through the fairy tales for first grade and you're like, I can't read that to my kid. I can't tell that story. That story is horrible. They're going to be super uncomfortable. I want you to remember that fairy tales build resilience. And there's been studies on that. There's a lot of Waldorf work on fairy tales and why we need them. And again, we want our kids to build that piece of resilience with us. So that goes beyond that too. That goes to anything that they view. So it's okay that something makes them a little bit uncomfortable. Of course, you don't want them screaming and freaking out. Of course not. Of course not, because then you're not going to sleep for a few nights. But they're going to remember that for forever. But you do want to sort of allow them to be in this place of, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I don't like this. Oh, it fixes itself. Oh, it resolves. They need to be able to see the resolution. If they can't see the resolution, then they're always going to be worried about and in fear. They need to be able to see the end from the beginning so that they can have that in their own lives. They need to be able to know that it's okay to be uncomfortable, because then when we're uncomfortable, that's when we find ways to fix something. When we're uncomfortable and we get babied into not having things that into having somebody take care of something for us all the time, then we don't learn. So we need to be in a place where it's okay for us to be a little bit uncomfortable, because when we have rules, and some of them have been because I've allowed something like with the pony situation. I thought, well, okay, well, she's only gets a little bit of TV time. We'll just watch. And then I went, wait a minute. I watched how she acted, and it made her crazy. So we totally stepped back from that. And we couldn't just step back from the show, because then she was still reenacting with the toys. So, and we didn't even have that many things. And so we just made a decision. I said, honey, I love you, but the way you act when this happens, you're all crazy, and that means that that's not good for you. And mommy wants you to have things that are good for you. And she was little then. She was like 4. And so so now when she looks at it, she can say, I know that's not good for me. Can we look at toys that are good for me? And then we look at toys that are and I allow some plastic in that. And allow some fun things for her in that aren't of the Waldorf aesthetic. She has her own Legos. She likes the little fairy Legos. She likes those sorts of things. She loves the little ones with the little teeny animals because they're small. So when you're looking at those toy situations and you have kids that have their feet in both worlds, try not to get yourself sad and hurt for that. Just it is what it is. And even the most amazing Waldorf home that is Waldorf inside and out and has the beautiful aesthetic, there are other things that are going on. Maybe there's some not healthy relationship situations. Maybe there's some unhealthy buying and shopping situations. Maybe there's other stuff going on. So don't compare yourself to people that you don't know. And even when there are people that you do know, you probably don't know everything. So don't make a comparison. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is sort of this idea that, well, I can't be Waldorf because I don't eat differently. I don't, we have all of these things that seem mainstream to Waldorf people. And I want to say to you that you don't have to have a special diet to be part of Waldorf. Now, while I will say that, there are a lot of families that are Waldorf families that do that eat differently. Absolutely, we eat differently, but differently being they're more conscious about the food supply, and so not everybody's on a gluten-free, nut-free, grain-free diet. Remember that Facebook is it's like a fishbowl, so you don't see everybody. And like I think about our Waldorf co-op, we have about 13 moms, and only about half of them have some food situation going on. And it's because they're working through something with their kids, or there's some allergy issue. It's the rest of them, they don't have anything going on with their kids. And so they don't have any food allergy situations. So when you see like a ton of that going on Facebook, a lot of that is because we have a lot of people that are coming to Waldorf that see this in other places and they want to be there, and they just happen to eat differently. And that is what it is. Definitely, you will see more attention to whole organic foods, foods that are not prepackaged, those sorts of things. And that's a good way to go anyway. It's a good direction to think about anyway. And so when you're coming to Waldorf, don't be intimidated by that. If you're going to a Waldorf co-op and you're like, crap, I don't know what to make, just go buy some fruit. Bring fruit. Fruit is always easy. There was a while in our co-op where I was like, I don't know everybody's food allergies. I'm just bringing fruit. So I just brought fruit every time. And you know, until I could get my head around who was allergic to what. And so just be simple. You don't have to, you know, be extravagant. I always sort of laugh because I do think there is this tendency among Waldorf moms when they get together to bring out all the weird food that they have. And it's kind of funny. But when you're around them all the time, then it doesn't seem so weird. And it seems when you get to know each other, things calm down. So don't be stressed out in those sorts of situations. Please don't feel inferior. Please don't feel like you have to measure up to this standard, this ideal, because that's really a false thing. Waldorf is about the education. It is a way of living, only in that it informs. Once you understand it, it really informs just about everything you do. You start to think about whether or not things are appropriate for your children. And there'll be all kinds of things that you'll come up with that you'll think about. You know, I know that this is true in development for this child, so I think I need to think about this a little bit more. So really understanding what Waldorf is all about is the best thing you can do. So there's great resources. If you're ready to dive right into his work, I would read Kingdom of Childhood. It's a perfect, great first Steiner read. Sorry, I got people talking to me. I'm going to move those off my screen. Kingdom of Child is perfect and great. Another one that I really like, and it has a lot of compiled Steiner works, and sort of a good overview on education, is Rhythms of Learning by Roberta Trostley. It is an excellent book, and it is a great way to sort of have a little bit of a filter so that you can understand some more of the work. So because Steiner it's not easy bedtime reading when you're first starting. It is for me now, but again, I'm weird. I've been reading it for a long time, so I can read it and not fall asleep. But in the beginning, I couldn't. In the beginning, I needed help. I needed things like Rhythms of Learning, and I read Rhythms of Learning off and on all year long because I like those reminders. I like Trostley's voice, and I like the way his voice blends with Steiner's voice. So I find a lot of use in continuing, especially when I'm revising a curriculum or writing a new curriculum. It's very helpful for me to be able to go back and pick up those nuggets. And so definitely read Steiner. That will help you not be so stressed out about all of this. Now, he does say some things like, you will never be able to recover if you do this. There's all this damage in childhood. So I want you to think of a few things. One, translation. So you're getting it translated from German into English. And I think there's a lot of words that don't mean exactly the same thing. They don't translate correctly. And there's just not a way to translate the way that language always is. Like freedom means something totally different to Americans than it does to Germans. Totally different. So I want you to keep that in mind. I also want you to keep in mind that while he is the father of this amazing education, he was never a dad. So he didn't have the real world experience that we have. So we have to take his work and we have to blend it into what we have every day. So I think that that's super important to remember. I also think it's super important, and this is something that I believe with all my heart. And this is me as a person that walks with God, that God knows your intent and God knows what's in your heart. And whatever noun you want to put on the word God is fine with me. Source, goddess, any of that. God knows what's in your heart. And if you intend to do good and you accidentally do bad, then God's going to remember that. Your intention was to do good. So you're working every day to striving to be a better parent, a better wife, a better friend, all of those things. That striving means something to God. I believe that with all my heart. And so don't beat yourself up so much. We're here to learn so that we can return. And while we're on this learning process, we have all of these options available to us. And we just need to sort of take our time, take a deep breath. Remember, it's not a race. And direction is far more important than speed. So take your time. You're not going to convert your house overnight. You're not going to convert your husband overnight, especially if you're pushing. So don't push. Step back and offer observation. Honey, I've not had the TV on all day long. Look at how peaceful they are. They've not played video games in a week. I think we should maybe have some rules about that. Let's tie that to how well they do during the week, and then if they're not behaving themselves, do not allow the media. The media in our house was always a not a weird reward as far as like you do this and you get that like all the time, but it was we always tried to make it a real world reward, as in if I don't do my work, then I can't have the reward. Like if I don't make sure that the house is tidy, I really can't feel good about sitting and knitting because I'm going to think about the dishes that aren't done. So my reward for getting all of the tidying done is to sit and take a deep breath and get to knit. So the reward for them getting their chores done and having those things finished, we're teaching them that we get to do something fun after we take care of our responsibilities. And that's a good thing to teach. It's not you don't do this so you can't have that. It's more of we're teaching responsibility. So if you can tie their media time to that, I think it's very healthy to do that because we're teaching them. Again, you don't just come home and sit and play video games all day long because that's not going to help you get a job. It's just not. And so we put parameters on things, and it's okay to put parameters on things. There is sort of this idea in the positive parenting movement, and I'm not quite sure where it comes from because it's not coming from the parents that I know that are doing a really good job of it. They know that there has to be boundaries. So don't confuse permissive parenting with positive parenting because they're not the same thing. And don't expect to just overnight change everything. It didn't take you overnight to get here. It's a journey. So take your time, take a deep breath. Remember that a lot of times that journey has to go within before it can go anywhere else. So that journey is a lot about you and a lot about your relationship with God, your relationship with your husband, and not so much about your relationship with these things. So think about, what would your relationship with your children be without those things in the way, and really try to nurture those things and really work to have that awesome home life, because I really believe that is what your children will remember. Your children will remember how much love was in your home, and they're not going to remember what they played with. I want to say one more thing too really quick before we're done. So I did get to spend time at Comic-Con, and that is something we've done for a lot of years because we get to go as education writers. We get to go for free, and it's really hard to get into. But if you have the opportunity to go, though, I have to tell you, I got to go to there's this section upstairs that's the art show, and so it's different people that have submitted things, some of them for sale, some of them just to be seen in their art show. And they're usually, they're people that are usually, like, there's a steampunk area, which is really amazing to watch every time. I love looking at those things, even though I'm not into steampunk. I love the way it looks, and I love looking at the art that comes from that. There's usually, a comic section, and there's usually a Star Wars section. And so we got to walk through and see all of this. I was impressed by students that had to have been Waldorf students. There were these amazing veil paintings of Star Wars ships, like wet on wet veil paintings, Star Wars ships, amazing. And then these other amazing pieces of art that were using the hash method that Steiner used. And so I know that those students had that foundation. And so look for that when you're stressed out about, oh no, we're going down this slippery road. Just take a deep breath and remember that moderation is the key, that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. My mom taught me that. And that you really have to sort of understand balance, and that means Waldorf balance too. It doesn't just mean less of the other. It means understanding that Waldorf is a balance, and not being so stressed out about things. I would say the biggest things you could do to help your household would be to figure out the media situation. Media and sleep and having a good rhythm, I think, are super important. And media can sometimes get in the way of that. People don't understand that media right before bed affects children. Too much media during the day really affects their behavior. And the way to combat that is honestly get outside And if you live in a place where it's like 120 degrees right now, get outside this morning when it's only 90, and then spend your time inside this afternoon playing a board game, reading books together. There are so many things that you can do that don't involve media, and it's going to be hard when you're backing off from it. But even if you only make it until 11 o'clock the first day before something comes on, the next day say, oh, I'm going to make it till after lunch. And the next day, we're not going to do anything till after 2. And the next day, and before you know it, it's going to be the week before school starts, and you're not going to have anybody asking for media before 4 o'clock. So our rules were always, it had to be after 4, and it was Tuesday and Friday was what worked in our house. And it was not an insane amount. It was, like 30 minutes, an hour. And it's harder as they get older. So, there have been times when I've got a kid watching their 30 minutes on a tablet and somebody else might be watching something on the TV. But we balance it. And when it's done, it's done. It does not interrupt mealtime. It does not interrupt being outside. So you have to really balance that. And that would be Waldorf or not. We have this generation of kids that spends too much time inside. And so really work to get them outside and really work to have fun. And you have fun too. This should be an awesome journey. It should not be a stressful one. So don't be stressed out. Don't be feeling bad about yourself. Have a good time. And when you're feeling bad about yourself and you're looking at a pretty Pinterest picture or a pretty blog, I want you to just close your eyes and I want you to imagine what you would see if that person turned that camera around. And then smile and walk on, because often you would probably see a sink full of dirty dishes. There might be, the great thing about a camera is you can't hear a kid screaming with a camera. So unless it's a video camera, you don't know really what's going on. So I would try to keep that in mind. So I'm glad you joined me. I know we had some tech issues. Hopefully it wasn't too big of a deal. At Melisa at waldorfessentials.com. So I hope you have a wonderful day.